Hey there, it's Kevin with the Rogue Market here with this week's episode of the Market Monday Recap, where I recap the popular series that I do over at my main channel, the Rogue Deck Builder, called Market Monday, that just gives an overview of what's going on in the Magic the Gathering market. And for this video series, I usually just do a top 10 list of cards that I'm looking at closely or investing in. For the topic for this week's Market Monday was the Week 1 results of the Standard for Ravnica Allegiance cards, particularly cards that just got better in Standard after Ravnica Allegiance. And we also have results in today for the Modern. So first of all, I'm just going to talk about the 5 cards. So it makes a good top 10 list here. The 5 cards that actually did show up Week 1 of Ravnica Allegiance Modern. And then I'm going to give you 5 cards that I think overperformed based upon their current cost. And they might be interesting targets to invest in, especially if their price goes down a little bit more, as I think that they are outperforming again what we saw with the results, or exactly how much they cost comparatively to other cards. So let's take a look first about Modern. And so this is my number 5 card for Modern, was Tithe Taker. This one saw a 2 of in a Spirits list, and it does see some play in Standard at the moment. It actually saw the Mardu aggro list with Judith with Standard, and I usually love double dippers, cards that see play both in Standard and in Modern. That hits the perfect sweet spot. We saw that with Arclight Phoenix. That's exactly why it took off. It needed both of them to see heavy play in both the formats for the card to go crazy. So Tithe Taker does kind of fit this little niche here. It does see play in Standard. It does see play in Modern. However, it's not really breaking out in either one of them. It was just in one deck in Standard and a few of these Azorius Spirits decks in Modern. I think that it is an option in Humans. Humans do have a few other things they can go rather than the Tithe Taker, but it was in one of these lists for the Azorius Spirits as a 2 of. On to the next one, which I think has more potential to go up than Tithe Taker, is Absorb. Yes, this is a reprint, but it was a reprint from a very, very old set, a pre-modern set of the Invasions. So the card from Invasion is spiked up to $16 in anticipation for people wanting cool copies, old school copies for Standard. And we have the one from Ravnica Allegiance sitting at the $2.25. This was, I believe, in the guild kits though, so it does have a ceiling of where Absorb can go to. However, seeing play as a 4 of in a Modern deck is definitely something that is encouraging week number 1. This was played in a white-blue mid-range deck as 2 in the main and 2 in the side. If we can find the right list here. I think it's this one right here. So there were 2 Absorbs in the main, 2 Absorbs in the side in this Restoration Angel, Kitchen Finks, Wall of Omens. Haven't seen this type of deck in a while, but looks like that it's good enough for Modern. It's good enough for Standard. It's also seeing more than a bit of play, as it has replaced in the Esper as well as the Azorius list. People are running Absorb over the Surveil counterspell. So I think that $2.25 is a bargain for Absorb, even though it is in these guild kits that I don't know if they're going to be very popular because the value is not as there like it was in the ones that past. So it does have that going for it. The next one I want to talk about is Skewer the Critics. So this one I don't think is investable, of course, at 79 cents. But if this is something you want to definitely take out of your bulk, it's funny that there's 2 cards right now above 50 cents in the Ravnica Allegiance for common. So it's actually adding towards the box value, the EV, of these type of cards that have real world value. In fact, Card Kingdom is selling this for $1 a piece. So these cards must be flying off the shelf. This is another card that is seeing a lot of play in mono red decks in both Standard, as well as seeing a lot of play in various decks in Modern. It had a few of the mono red aggro finishes, or just burn finishes in Modern, as well as a couple Phoenix decks, and this was a burn as well. So it was a burn, and a Phoenix deck that ran the Skewer the Critics. People are preferring this over Lava Spike in some instances, as the damage can be directed towards creatures. It just doesn't have to go directly to the face, and Spectacle is very easy to hit. So Skewer the Critics, again, this is one of those cards you just don't want to just throw away. You want to separate these from a bulk, but I highly do not think you should be investing in a common. It's very, very tough in commons in print and Standard to have any sort of real-world value. We saw it with Thraben Inspector, though. This will bottom out before it goes back up. So it's another card you're just going to wait till the draft season happens. Just keep picking these up out of draft trash piles or making offers for these for drafters. And little by little, I think you can get out of these 50 to $1 in by the time it rotates. And again, that has real-world value. So next one's a really, really good one with the uncommon. I do believe is it an investable target, because I think this is going to be a $2 card, no problem, with the amount of play this is seeing in both standard and in modern, as well as I think that post rotation this is going to be one of the go-to cards for the mono red standard. I think mono red, a lot of cards will be able to stick around, and that will always be an archetype. It seems like every set they make sure that mono red is an archetype for a budget, or just to keep the format fair, I guess, is or so that a lot of degenerate things do not happen. So Light of the Stage is a 3 mana that you can exile top 2 cards of your library until your next turn. You play those cards, but Spectral 1 is definitely where this card is very, very powerful. In standard, we have it replacing both the risk factor and the Flame of Keld in the week 1 results, and we also do see these in various Phoenix and Burn decks in modern. So if it's powerful enough for modern, it definitely is good enough for standard. And what I really like about this is it seems like the foils are lagging behind other uncommon foils. You'll see here one of my other cards I'll be looking at that doesn't see play currently in standards are up to like $11, $12 foil. However, Light Up the Stage is a little bit back. And I think this one was a promo though for F&M. Correct me if I'm wrong here. I think it was though for one of them. So that might be keeping the foil price down. On to the next one that I think was the most interesting card for modern. This is Electrodominance. Electrodominance was seeing play in an As Foretold Living End deck. We'll just actually check out this sweet little brew here, which is running a full 4 of them. So it is Electrodominance into Living End. You cycle of the Striped Riverwinder, the Desert Ceradon, the Curative Mysteries, and you still have Ancestral Visions it can work with, as well as Living End, and then As Foretold's another way to cast that Living End. So you're just going to cycle for the Living End, and that's how you're going to cheat it out. So I actually really do like this list. If I ever do play Modern again, this deck does seem very, very interesting to me. It's got little actual baby Jace here in the main. It's got some Fulminator Mages, Anger of Gods on the sideboard. So typical Living End list, but going the kind of As Foretold's blue route, and they can actually go a different route with the Cryptic Commands, with the Jace, the Mind Sculptors, and just actually control your opponent out. And I'm assuming can hit a pretty large Electrodominance later on. So pretty cool little list here with the Living End with Electrodominance. So Electrodominance currently is sitting at a very, very high price tag at $8. I think that's kind of the problem with Ravnica Allegiance. It's one of these sets that didn't get bottomed out. I mean, to be fair, the release date hasn't even happened yet. We're still a Tuesday, so we're a couple days out from when packs can be legitly sold. But with how pre-orders work this day and age, a lot of supply. Same with the pre-release that just happened. There is a lot of supply out there, and I think that everything in Ravnica Allegiance is very overinflated at the moment, and cards will come down. I think this card will come down more into the $3 to $4 range. If it starts to get very low, though, for whatever reason, the Living End deck kind of falls out of favor, this is a card I do like to pick up, as I think it will have its breakout day in Standard as well. As far as power level is concerned, this is one of the most powerful cards out of Ravnica Allegiance. So now let's move on gears here to cards that I think overperformed, or maybe the first one I think is a sleeper, and the other ones I think overperformed based upon their price point. So the first one I want to talk about is the Pteramander. Pteramander is a card that I have been having success with in Arena. I know Arena isn't real Magic as far as competitive is concerned, but I've been able to win multiple tournaments in Arena with the Pteramander as the best card hands down in the deck now for the mono. Well, Curious Obsession, of course, is the best card, but Pteramander is definitely your go-to one-drop. Completely replaced the 1/1 unblockable Merfolk with Pteramander, and I was happy both tournaments with it, as you usually do have an unblockable. Flying is basically evasive enough in today's day and age, if you look in the meta on turns 2, 3. Maybe later on they can deal with it, but that's when you want the Curious Obsessions to hit. And what really makes Pteramander better than an unblockable 1/1 is you fill up your graveyard very quickly with Chart a Course. I even have Discovery Dispersal in the deck, and pretty soon you have a 5/5 flyer that can take over the game quite quickly. It doesn't feel as bad in multiples as the 1/1 unblockable does. So I think 60 cents is kind of a bargain here. I don't believe it's in the guild kits. I'll have to check it out again and to see if this one is. If it is, I don't think it will affect the price tag too much. And if you can see the foil, $11.28 is just crazy compared to its normal price. And uncommons generally they have a hard time going over that 50-cent barrier to $1 barrier, but I think this is one that does see play in Modern, and where I think the power level is there. We see like the Gurmag Angler being able to cheat out with the Delve, well, this Adept is very similar to that, to be able to use this towards making this a 5/5 flyer. 5/5, of course, is superior to 5/5 ground flying. So it has already seen play in a Legacy deck. Look at that. It's a Pteramander, Arclight, Phoenix, Delver, Secrets deck, which I'm sure this sort of shell can be utilized in Modern, and of course this sort of shell also looks like it can be utilized in Standard with these sort of spells. That's the one takeaway we had from Standard, was there was no Izzet deck. Izzet just seemed to get stomped, or just people just were is out of sight, out of mind, and people weren't even testing it against the field. So keep your eye on Pteramander. I think it's a sleeper. All right, so on it to the card that I think, the first card that I think underperformed or overperformed based on its price cost is the Pelt Collector. This is $3.75, and it has seen play in the past in Modern, and I do think the power level is definitely there for Modern. This saw a lot of play over the day one results in Simic Aggro, Gruul Stompy decks. Some of them were the Elf Ball, some of them were just your traditional Stompy decks with the Nullhide Ferox with the Steely Champion. I think this is a great one drop to get bigger. It seems like that's where the format's trying to go, is very, very big, and maybe that's why Izzet's having a tough time, is now a Crackling Drake or Enigma Drake just seem too slow for a format that can just bust open. So I do like Pelt Collector. You still want a good curve in those Stompy decks, and I think the Llanowar Elf is, of course, something that just skip the curve a little bit, but the other one drop you definitely want to run is probably going to be the Pelt Collector. Still has good synergy with the cards, the Explore cards like the J-Light Ranger, and you at least get that first trigger before the triggers go on the stack, so Pelt Collector can still get buffed up from those, and then definitely gets the bigger buffs from the other creatures that come, like the Nullhide Ferox and the Steely Champion. So I think $3.75 is a good bargain if you find it for $3. And then I think this card will hit in sometime in Standard season, maybe if Gruul becomes very big. We're looking at $5, $6, $7, $8 easy. All right, so on to the next one, which I don't like its price point according to the Tishy market price, but or the Tishy mid. But if you go to market price, there's plenty of copies of Nexus of Fate at $21. According to Mark Rosewater, there's more Nexus of Fates out there than any other Mythic with the Buy a Box promo, but the big difference between Buy a Box promos and just regular Mythics is the distribution is a lot more awkward. So Buy a Box promos get not into the market as easily as regular Mythics do for the mass box openers. So why I like Nexus of Fate, it had a pretty good showing over the weekend, and it's everywhere on Arena. And when I say everywhere, I mean everywhere. It's like every other deck you play is a Nexus of Fate deck. There are a bazillion ways to build it now with the Reclamation, and lo and behold, look at this. It's actually hit a list in Modern. I know this has been a few weeks ago, but there has been in Modern Turbo Fog. So anything that's a 4 of that is so warpy as Nexus of Fate, which is just can take over the game by itself once you have the Search for Azcanta lock. You even have access to cards like Utopia Sprawl and Fertile Ground like you see here for Modern. Very, very powerful card. It can compete in this sort of strategy. You just need Teferi or Jace. Their win conditions in of themselves. I think that this deck will be an archetype here to stay. And so I think Nexus of Fate is a card that is never really going to bottom out after it rotates out. So they did it. They created a card that was supposed to be for Commander only. That's what the Buy a Box promo wasn't supposed to affect like Standard and Modern because they didn't want a runaway price point. Well, they did it, and it looks like Nexus of Fate is going to have a runaway price point. I don't think this card's ever going to go below 23, 24, even after rotation. And I think it's a good time to pick up the copies and look towards the future with those. So typically I don't like to invest in cards that have this sort of price tag, but still where I'm really saying you should try to target these is those lows on TC Mid. You can still find them for 21. And still, you can still find them for bargain compared to its mid price. So I think those will dry up pretty soon. There wasn't too many copies, but there was enough to make a smart little investment. All right, on to the next one is the Dire Fleet Daredevil. I think this overperformed based upon its price point. A, because Rivals of Ixalan, anything that sees even remote play out of Rivals of Ixalan, usually has a huge chance of going up past the $5 mark because this is the least open set in the mix that is currently in Standard. It even, I believe, maybe Core 2019 is less, but I believe Rivals of Ixalan is the least open. It just was not popular whatsoever during a time when Standard was abysmal and just no packs were being cracked. But if you look over here, it saw a ton of play in Standard. Look at how many decks that this saw, different archetypes that this saw. This still sees play in Modern in various, I believe the Pyromancer decks, the Mardu Pyromancers will play it every now and again. The Humans decks put it in the sideboard depending on the meta. Looks like a black-red. Let's check out this black-red deck to see what they use the Direfleet Daredevil. I mean, it's no Snapcaster Mage, but it's definitely still a pretty decent one. This particular one, now that we look at it, doesn't have it in. But we've seen the Direfleet Daredevil in Modern before. I think that it's a very meta-dependent card, but if there are worthy spells to use against your opponent, I think it's a great little sideboard card for that. And this is no joke with how much standard play it sees. And what else I like about this, the lowest price point ever for the Direfleet Daredevil. We're at the low. This is the time I like to get into cards, especially ones that have proven themselves in the past. So good card to get into based on how it performed. Last but not least, this card is in the Guilds of Ravnica, or the Ravnica Legion's guild kit. However, we saw with like the Legion Loyalist that it's still able to retain at least $3-4 price tag, even though it's in those guild kits. And this is Zegana Utopian Speaker. This was in various decks of Golgari, and I think people still haven't seen just the really good curve that this card has with the Explore deck. So if you have a Jadelight Ranger or the Wildgrowth Walker or a Seeker into a Zegana, you have a 4/4 that's going to be able to give your creatures trample, as well as go for an adept to be an 8/8 trampler. So I think that that's exactly where the deck wants to be. So it's a good stuff deck. It's a value-based deck, but it sometimes struggles with finishers. That's why they've gone into like Carnage Tyrants and other things like that. I think Zegana might be able to lessen the curve out of that deck and just be the finisher by herself. So I think the 94 cents is definitely a bargain, and is kind of a sleeper with this card. It's going to take a while for this card to hit the supply where it's going to be able to outstretch it. Sometimes rares never get to that point. Look at Find Finality and how much play that card saw, and it's still under $1. So I could be wrong about this card just based upon that fact, but usually creatures do have a better time being able to go up in value than something like Find Finality. This will have a lot of commander and casual appeal to it, and I think this is a steal of a deal right now. Based upon, I think when I looked this up, this was the second least expensive card that actually saw play in Standard. The other one was that the Bedeck. And Bedeck was only in one deck, kind of a niche little deck. This is in multiple Golgari lists. It's still powerful enough for even Merfolk lists. You can run this in because there's a lot of +1/+1 counters in Merfolk. If that is ever a breakout deck, this is still a curve topper for that type of deck to even draw a card. And I think that the power level is definitely there for Zegana. And yeah, so this is the card I like the most. And that's my recap for this week's Market Monday. We'll check back next week for what I'll be talking about, which topic I'll be talking about that week. Just to go for a recap here, there are 5 cards that saw week 1 for the Modern. That was the Tithe Taker in Spirits, the Absorb in Blue-White Tempo or Mid-Range or Control. The Skewer the Critics and Light Up the Stage were in multiple decks. The mainly red deck wins decks. The Electrodominance was out of a Sweet Living End brew. My sleeper card pick is the Pteramander. The Pelt Collector, I think, was overperformed based upon its price point. Nexus of Fate, I think, is going to dry up soon. And the Direfleet Daredevil and Zegana just had a lot of showing compared to their price point for Standard. So those are my picks for this week. Check back next week. And this has been Kevin with the Rogue Market. Thanks for watching.